Well, joining us now, we can talk about this issue with White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki. Jen, it's great to have you on the show.
Good morning. Great to be here.
Good morning. Great to see you. Let's start with the filibuster. We know the president wants to keep it intact. Does that mean for all legislation? Is there any possibility for some exceptions?
Well, look, as you know, Mika and Joe, he was in the Senate for 36 years, and his preference, as you said, is not to make changes to the filibuster. And he wants to leave the door open to bipartisan work. And people may say that's naive or they may be frustrated, but he feels he's only 40 days into his administration, and he wants that door to be open so that Republicans and Democrats can work together on legislation moving forward.
So, Jen, how important is this voting rights bill? That is probably going to be up next in the House and the Senate. How important is it that Democrats figure out a way to stop Republicans from doing what they're doing in Georgia, what they're doing in Iowa, doing what they're doing across state legislatures across America, where they want to make it harder for Americans to vote?
You're absolutely right, Joe, and it's outrageous, and I loved what I'm going to steal what Casey said, and they said the quiet part out loud, and it shouldn't be harder for people to vote. And if people have the best ideas, they should want more people to vote. That's something the president absolutely believes. You talked about the legislation, of course, that's working its way through Congress. What we're seeing out there is Democrats are trying to figure out a path forward. They want this legislation to pass. The president wants this legislation to pass. And most importantly, making sure more people have access to voting, to be able to vote, and making it easier, something that's a core value for the president for his presidency. So he'll push for this, and he's going to keep looking for ways to get that done over the course of the next coming couple months.
Hey, Jen, it's Willie. Good to see you this morning. We know that the president has reached out to Republicans, both publicly and privately, to get this legislation passed. It looks like at the end of the day, he won't get a single one of them to vote in either the Senate or the House for its passage. So what did you learn, and what did the White House, what did the president learn about what Washington is going to look like for the next 3.5, 4 years if you can't get Republicans on board for a bill that is this publicly popular?
Well, I think we've all learned that Republicans living in this zip code are outliers to where the American people are. And I know you talked about this a little bit earlier in the show. Some people who are Republicans can explain that more to the rest of us. But the majority of the country supports this bill. The majority of Republicans across the country support this bill and package. And I think this is going to require a moment of self-reflection for Republicans who aren't supporting getting checks to almost 160 million Americans, money to reopen schools, money to vaccinate people. Since when is that a Democratic idea? It's an idea that most Americans support, and maybe they need to look a little bit inside about why they're opposed to it.
The progressives, and I'm sure you're hearing from a lot of them, including many in the Senate, would tell you this very process tells you why you need to get rid of the filibuster. There's no way you're ever going to get 60 votes on anything. You just have to go on a straight majority for the rest of the president's presidency. What do you say to those progressives? What do you say to people like Bernie Sanders?
Well, first, Bernie Sanders called this one of the most sweeping pieces of legislation in modern American history. I'm paraphrasing a little bit there, but some version of that. And this is a bill that was supported by not just him, but also Senator Joe Manchin. So Democrats really stuck together on this. I will say, Willie, that there's a lot of lessons a lot of us who've worked in government and even in the White House before, including the president, have learned. He didn't sit around and wait for negotiations to continue for months. He supported using the reconciliation process to get this bill through and get it passed. That does mean it looks to be headed on a party line vote, but he wasn't going to play games and wait for relief to get to the American people. So that is a way that it moved forward, it passed, but we're going to keep the door open moving forward, Willie, because look, there are things like infrastructure investment. Traditionally, historically, there's been bipartisan support for that. Everybody wants to rebuild roads, railways, and bridges. There's been historic support for modernizing our immigration system, and he wants to talk to Republicans and Democrats about getting those things done.
So, Jen, we want to ask you about the potential humanitarian crisis that is developing at the southern border. Two sources confirmed to NBC News that more than 3,200 unaccompanied migrant children are in Border Patrol custody. That's a record number. Nearly half of the children have been held beyond the 3-day legal limit, some in holding cells that are not designed for children. And according to a source, nearly 170 of them are younger than 13. The New York Times was first to report the number of detained children. The paper, citing internal Customs and Border Patrol documents, reported that the number had tripled in the last 2 weeks. What is happening, and how is the Biden administration going to deal with this situation?
Well, Miguel, let me first say it's incredibly difficult and quite an emotional issue for many of us in the White House, whether you're a parent or not, just watching these stories and hearing these reports. So this is something that is front and center for the president. The reason we're in this circumstance with thousands of kids coming across the border is because this administration did not feel that it was humane or moral to send kids back on this treacherous journey, back to countries where they were fleeing persecution, where they were fleeing really difficult circumstances. So now we're in this tough spot where we need to be able to find facilities, shelters, where these kids can have access to educational resources, to lawyers, to doctors. And we are also in a circumstance where we're dealing with COVID. So a lot of these facilities have smaller capacity. So that's the challenge, and that's what we're confronting. As you saw this weekend, the president asked a number of the senior policy officials who are running point on this very tough issue to go visit one of the shelters in Carrizo Springs in Texas and visit a Border Patrol station. What we are trying to do, Mika, is move kids as quickly as possible through the Border Patrol facilities into shelters so that they can gain access to all of those resources I said, and then quickly move them into sponsor homes or connect them with family members. That's our objective, and that's what the policy process is working through right now.
But, you know, the Trump administration received a lot of criticism for separating families. These are unaccompanied minors. What about trying to reconnect them with their families? And what's different here?
Well, first, we're not ripping children from the arms of their parents. That's exactly what the Trump administration did, and we don't think that's a moral step. We also are not sending kids back on a treacherous trip that is dangerous, and many have lost their lives. So that's another big difference.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank all of you out there.
Thank you as always.
Thanks to at home.
Thanks for watching.
Thank you so much for letting us into your homes during these extraordinary times.